When our daughter was a newborn, we got this app that kind of explained the different stages of development and particularly focused on that first year of life. And it talked about how some of the shifts that happen, especially in that first year, are just so transformative in a kid, that just so disorienting. Like they wake up and their whole worldview has kind of shifted. And they use this to, help educate parents and also explain why a kid will go from being happy-go-lucky to suddenly crying all the time or not sleeping again and all those kinds of things. And the author or the designer of this app and book described it as if we as adults saw the world in 2D, and that's how we knew the world and that's how we functioned. And then all of a sudden we just woke up one day and our world was in 3D. And just how confusing and difficult and scary and maybe exciting that shift would be in our brain and our need to get used to that. I felt like I saw one of those shifts, particularly in my child, when I gave her her first little bit of baby food. And I imagine those you have been with your own kids or nieces and nephews that have had their food for the first time, and just how shocking it is to suddenly have this hard little spoon in their mouth and this weird texture that certainly isn't milk. And I remember just looking at my daughter's eyes as they just got big and like, I don't know if I like this. This might be terrible. I might love this. I just don't know. And of course we laughed and it was just such a joy to watch that shift happen to her. And also watch how that first little bite of food, of that icky little baby food, at least in my opinion, opened her world up to what it means for us as humans to eat food, to dine together, to cook together, just all the ways that first little mouthful changed her life. And as I read our gospel today, I think maybe it makes the most sense if we imagine that we are all little infants, and God is giving us this little bite of food. I could not explain to my 6-year-old what was going to happen that day when I didn't give her her bottle and I gave her that little food. It would make no sense to her. And I kind of think it's the same with us. When we hear that gospel, at least for me, I hear that gospel, and as much as even though I grew up Catholic and have been raised always with, this is my flesh, this is my blood, I still read it and I'm a little like, oh, that's weird. That's hard to understand, And I think just the same way that I couldn't have explained to my daughter what it was like to put this food in her mouth and how it was going to open up a whole new world for her and nourish her body in the way that it now needed to be nourished as she aged. And I think it's the same with us with the Eucharist. We can't understand it. We can't make total sense of it. I often find myself kind of like the temple authorities. I want to say really, Jesus, this is the thing. This is what makes sense. And we just have to live in some of that mystery and know that in some ways we can't make sense of it as much as we would love to. And I think as we try to make sense of it, though, and try to see how it impacts our daily life and what it calls us to, we can look at all three of our readings and really see some specific ways of how having that bread and wine, consuming that flesh and blood in a way that makes no sense to us, how it can still transform our lives. I really loved the first reading, and I know sometimes when I just hear the readings read for the first time, it doesn't really stick with me. So I'd invite you, especially the first and second reading of this Sunday, go back and read them today later on, because they just have some really beautiful imagery. But in the first reading, this is our wisdom literature from the Old Testament. And wisdom is with a capital W. And in our scripture, wisdom is always referred to as she. And she is waiting to greet us. And she's welcoming anyone who comes to her, and anyone who does come to her and dines from her table will enjoy life and walk in the path of understanding. That's what that first reading says. Our second reading talks about something very similar and invites us to shift away from our focus on consuming the things of this world, consuming the bread and wine of this world, and instead being inebriated on the wine of the Spirit. And I love, in our translation, it doesn't say inebriated, it says being, delighted or something in the wine. But I really like some of the other ones talk about actually being inebriated in the Spirit. And I think about the opposite between what it would mean to be drunk on wine or drunk on any of the other substances and things that we often let control our lives, and be drunk in the Spirit. And I think for myself, I have certainly, unfortunately, at times of my life, drank too much wine. And you know what that does to me? Closes me off, makes me feel icky in the morning, makes me want to just sleep and not be around other people because it makes you feel terrible. Being drunk on the Spirit, on the other hand, opens us up, wants us to welcome this world, to be with others, to be our true selves. And that's what the second reading is inviting us to do, and to make that shift. And then lastly, in our gospel, it's saying coming to this table, drinking that bread and wine, being inebriated in the Spirit is what is going to give us life everlasting. And so when we think about what those three readings, how they're going to impact our lives, I think the first one from wisdom is talking about how coming to God, coming to wisdom's table, does take some effort on our part. Wisdom sets her table, but we have to show up. We have to come. And that's not only about coming to this table once a week, as lovely as that is and as important as it can be, but it also means in our daily life, finding a way to come to wisdom's table. As I talk about this, I always feel like a hypocrite because I am not good at daily praying or daily meditating. It has always been a challenge for me. But I have found, and right now I'm on a 5-day streak, I have found that when I am able to do that every day, it starts to just slowly, a little bit, shift me to see God, to be with wisdom. I have more gratitude in my heart. I'm a little more easygoing when I show up at wisdom's table once a day. And so I would really like to invite us, and some of you I know have that practice, and you've had that practice your whole life, and it is amazing. Those of us that don't, I would say find that, whether you're a morning person like me, and it feels good to do it in the morning, if you're a night person, or if 2 in the afternoon, your life just works out that you always have a quiet spot right then. Do it then. Find the place to take, even if it starts out just being 5 minutes, to be still, to be in prayer, to meditate, any of those options. And when we do that consistently, take those little steps of turning up to God's table, we start to learn how to let go of the wine in this world that we get drunk on. Whether that is actual wine or screen time or anger or our need to control, whatever pulls our spirits. When we come to God's table, when we come to wisdom, we start to find a life of gratitude. And when we start to live that way, it will inevitably flow out into the world. As we learn to shift and heal our own hearts, we can bring kindness and justice to the world. One way that I see, and I know I've talked about this before, where I see myself close in, and it's a very silly way, but it happens every single day, is driving. I am kind of an aggressive driver. I'm an annoyed driver. Everybody else is inconveniencing me all the time. And one of my friends suggested that whenever somebody's driving like super slow or just making really dumb turns, that I should imagine that that person has a comically large, lovely house plant in soil that they're trying to get home. And so they're making slow turns. They're driving real slow because they don't want to spill that soil all over their car and ruin the beautiful house plant. Now, of course, the vast majority of the time, that's probably not true. But honestly, the vast majority of the time, those people are not driving that way to irritate me, right? It's not about me. They don't know. They're living their life. They drive a little different than me. It's none of my business, honestly. And so I think the more that we can shift, even if it's those silly little shifts, it makes us a little lighter. It opens our hearts up a little bit more. And it certainly helps us be kinder to other people. But I think more than anything, it helps us be kinder and more open in ourselves. Because instead of me clenching the wheel and feeling like this person's inconveniencing my life, I am open, I am laughing, I am hoping he gets his plant to his house. And I think the table of wisdom can open us up in that way. And it can give us some lightness. Like, our faith does not need to be all serious, I'm going to get to the place of peace and enlightenment and joy. It can be making silly stories up that help us be lighter and easier in our days. And then, when we are able to do that, we can approach this table in the way that our second reading talks about it. I love it. It talks about coming with singing hymns and songs to God in our hearts. And whether or not you like to sing out loud, I think about what are those songs in your heart, the ones that are just yours. And when you can start to open up and come to Wisdom's table more, we can sing more to God in our heart when we come to this table. And we can come and experience God in a different way, because this shifts from more than just the thing that we do on Sundays to this reminder and this real way that we are transformed. And, some of you may have had an experience in your life where you have come and had that bread and wine and you have truly felt transformed. I have friends that have stories where this feels so sacred and so amazing to them. To me, honestly, it doesn't. It's important, and I appreciate what it means, but it doesn't really impact me in that way. But I think it's the same like us as parents feeding our child that first little bite of food. For some kids, it's going to be like, and shock their world. For other people or for other folks, maybe not. And it's little tiny steps, little tiny things. And slowly, it's not some quick transformation, but slowly our world opens up bigger and bigger. And I think that's what it can be like for us at this table. We can start to see how this little bread and wine opens us up to a bigger world, just like that first little bite of baby food can open us up to so many tastes and so many memories of dining with others in our lives. And so I'd like to invite us this week, if you don't already, try to find that place where you can take 5 or 10 minutes in your day to just connect to God, connect to the openness in your life, and maybe try to find some way to find a little lightheartedness too. Find a little joy, and just look for, every day, just look for a little moment of joy and have a little moment of quiet. And see what that might open. See what maybe coming to the table next week, does it feel any different after practicing that for a week? And I think as we continue to do that and do the ups and downs and, my 5-day streak, unfortunately, it's eventually probably not going to be a streak anymore, and I'm going to start over again. But that's what it means to be a human. We just keep starting over. We just keep doing it. And so let's just keep doing it and see where it goes. Thank you.